My name is Samantha Wilson, and at 32 years old, I never imagined my family could still make my stomach twist into knots. As I drove toward my parents' suburban mansion for our monthly dinner, I rehearsed responses to their inevitable criticism. Little did they know about my recent promotion in the military, a secret that would soon explode their carefully constructed hierarchy. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel as I parked, bracing myself for the familiar chorus of disappointment. What no one expected was how an unexpected visitor would transform their perception forever. Before I tell you how my family forks dropped when they discovered who I really was, let me know where you are watching from, and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated. I grew up in Westfield, a picturesque Connecticut town where success was measured by the size of your house and the prestige of your job title. My childhood home stood as a physical manifestation of my father's priorities: immaculate landscaping, imposing columns, and a circular driveway where his luxury car always took center stage. Inside those walls, a toxic hierarchy had been established long before I could recognize it. My father, Thomas Wilson, built his reputation as a ruthless banking executive who climbed from middle management to senior vice president through sheer force of will and strategic networking. At 58, he still maintained the rigid posture and demanding presence that intimidated colleagues and family alike. His salt and pepper hair was always perfectly styled, his custom suits impeccable. To him, success had a very specific definition, one that included corner offices, country club memberships, and children who followed predetermined paths to status and wealth. My mother, Patricia Wilson, complemented his ambition with her own brand of social climbing. At 55, she preserved her former beauty queen looks through rigorous fitness regimens and expensive cosmetic procedures. Her calendar revolved around charity galas, women clubs, and dinner parties where she could showcase her perfect family. She measured her success through her children's achievements, but only the ones that fit her narrative. My older brother James embodied everything my parents valued. At 35, he had taken over the family investment firm, married Charlotte, a sophisticated socialite from a connected family, and produced 2 photogenic children who attended the right private schools. His house just 3 blocks from my parents looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. Sunday brunches at his home were highlighted in my mother's social media posts as evidence of family harmony. My younger sister, Allison Evans, had carved out her own version of approved success. At 29, she had secured a marriage to Bradley, a prominent dermatologist, lived in an exclusive gated community, and devoted herself to perfecting her home appearance and social connections. Her volunteer work at the Hospital Auxiliary Board gave her the right blend of charitable credibility and networking opportunities. Then, there was me, the disappointment. From an early age, I showed little interest in the beauty pageants my mother entered me in, or the finance internships my father arranged. Instead, I found purpose in challenge, discipline, and service. My announcement during senior year of high school that I planned to join ROTC in college was met with stunned silence, followed by weeks of attempts to talk me out of throwing my life away. I could still remember my father's words at dinner that night. I had just shown them the ROTC acceptance letter, my hands trembling with a mix of pride and apprehension. My father didn't even look up from his plate. "The military is for people who don't have better options, Samantha. People like us don't serve, we lead from positions of influence." My mother reached across to pat my hand. "Honey, think about what this would do to your complexion. All that sun and stress. And who would want to marry a military girl?" I joined anyway, finding in ROTC the purpose and community I had been searching for. Through college, every achievement I shared at family gatherings was dismissed or diminished. My first leadership award was met with my brother's observation that I was probably the only one who applied. My selection for advanced training was countered by my sister's announcement of her engagement, which monopolized family discussions for months. After graduation, I commissioned as a second lieutenant, beginning my career with optimism that eventually my family would recognize my path as valid. The early years seemed to confirm their low expectations, basic assignments, modest pay, and the transient lifestyle of moving between bases. I lived in a small apartment while James purchased his first luxury home. I wore uniforms while Allison showcased designer clothes. During those years, the monthly family dinners became rituals of humiliation. What my family didn't know and what I couldn't tell them due to security classifications was that my career had taken a specialized track. My aptitude for languages and analytical thinking had drawn the attention of military intelligence, where I began working on sensitive operations that required complete discretion. As my responsibilities grew, so did the gap between my public persona and professional reality. Those monthly dinners at my parents' house evolved into a psychological battlefield. Over perfectly plated meals served on heirloom china, my achievements were systematically minimized, while my siblings were celebrated. I developed strategies for surviving them, breathing techniques, mental escape plans, and a careful mask of indifference. Yet some childish part of me still craved their approval, still showed up hoping this time would be different. It never was, until that extraordinary weekend when everything changed. I pulled into my parents' driveway at exactly 6:30 p.m., knowing that arriving even 5 minutes late would trigger comments about my inability to manage time properly. The house looked particularly imposing that evening, windows glowing with warm light that promised comfort, but had always delivered judgment instead. James' Mercedes and Allison BMW already occupied prime spots in the circular drive. My modest Toyota, though only 3 years old and perfectly functional, would inevitably draw comments about my financial priorities. I checked my appearance one last time in the rearview mirror, professional, but understated, in black slacks and a navy blouse, minimal jewelry, and natural makeup, an outfit designed to give them as little ammunition as possible. When I rang the doorbell, a formality my siblings never observed, my mother answered with an air kiss that never quite reached my cheek. "Samantha, you made it." She gave me a quick once-over. "At least you are punctual." No greeting could have more perfectly established the tone for the evening. Inside, the familiar scene unfolded. My father stood by the living room fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand, deep in conversation with James about market fluctuations. Allison perched on the arm of the sofa beside her husband, laughing too loudly at something Bradley had said. Charlotte supervised their children as they played quietly with tablets in the corner, occasionally glancing up to ensure they weren't disturbing the adults. I made my way to the bar cart, pouring myself a modest glass of white wine. A defensive measure learned years ago: never get drunk at family gatherings, never lose control. "Ah, Samantha." My father finally acknowledged my presence with a cursory nod. "Your brother was just explaining his new investment strategy. Brilliant approach. Absolutely brilliant." "Nice to see you too, Dad," I said, taking a careful sip of wine. My mother bustled in from checking on dinner. "Everyone, I have news." She clasped her hands together dramatically. "Thomas, tell them who is stopping by tomorrow." My father puffed up with importance. "General Robert Lawrence will be joining us briefly tomorrow morning. The military contract I have been working toward for months seems promising, and Lawrence wants to discuss particulars." General Lawrence, I nearly choked on my wine. The name registered immediately in my mind as my direct superior, the man who had personally approved my recent promotion to colonel. "You know of him." My father looked surprised that I might have relevant knowledge. Before I could respond, James interrupted. "Dad, this is huge. Wilson Financial securing a military contract. The board will be impressed." And the dinner continued in this vein, with excited speculation about what General Lawrence's visit might mean for the family business. No one bothered to ask if I had any insights, despite my military position. Of course, they still thought I was merely a captain with little influence or connection to high-ranking officials. As we moved to the dining room, my mother artfully steered the conversation toward her favorite topic: family status updates. James dutifully reported on his son Alexander, admission to an exclusive preschool, and his daughter Emma, stunning performance at her ballet recital. Allison detailed her charity committee success and the vacation home she and Bradley were considering in Aspen. When the spotlight reluctantly turned to me, my mother didn't even attempt subtlety. "Samantha, darling, any news on the relationship front? You know, Elaine Hoffman's daughter was 34 before she met someone, and now she's pregnant with twins. There is still hope." I took a deliberate breath. "Actually, I have some career news. I recently—" Patricia passed the potatoes, "Would you—" My father cut me off without a glance. "James, tell me more about that Henderson acquisition." I fell silent, pushing food around my plate as the conversation moved on without me. The familiar ache of invisibility settled in my chest. Later, as my mother served her famous chocolate soufflé, James turned to me with his practiced big brother wisdom. "Sam, I know a guy at my firm who could help you transition to the private sector. The military has been a nice diversion, but it's time to get serious about your future. You are 32. This playing soldier routine has gone on long enough." A decade ago, his condescension might have made me shrink. That night, with the knowledge of my recent promotions still warm in my mind, I simply raised an eyebrow. "Playing soldier? You mean my 12 years of service and multiple commendations?" Allison laughed, the sound like glass breaking. "Oh, Sam, always so defensive. James is just trying to help. Not everyone can marry well or inherit a business, but you could at least find something more suitable for a Wilson." I opened my mouth to respond when my father set down his fork with a decisive clink. "Samantha, your siblings are right. This military phase has gone on long enough. You will never be anything significant in that world. At least stop pretending it's some kind of accomplishment." The table fell silent. My mother covered her discomfort with a brittle smile. James and Allison exchanged smug glances. Even their spouses looked uncomfortable, studying their desserts intently. Something in me that had bent for years under the weight of their dismissal finally stopped bending. The irony of my father's pronouncement, given what tomorrow would bring, almost made me laugh. Instead, I took a deliberate bite of soufflé, letting the moment stretch until my silence made them uncomfortable. That night, as I lay in my old bedroom surrounded by remnants of a childhood defined by falling short, I considered simply not showing up for breakfast. I could leave before dawn, avoid the whole dramatic scene that would inevitably unfold when General Lawrence arrived. Yet something inside me, some need for vindication, I thought I had outgrown, kept me there, waiting for morning. Sleep evaded me that night. The moonlight filtered through the same curtains that had hung in my bedroom since high school, casting familiar shadows across the ceiling. I stared at them just as I had on countless nights as a teenager, wrestling with the weight of never measuring up. My family had no idea who I had become over the past 5 years. They still pictured me as the uncertain young lieutenant, when in reality, my career had taken an extraordinary trajectory that even I sometimes found hard to believe. It had begun with my facility for languages. My ability to rapidly learn Farsi and Arabic had caught the attention of intelligence officers seeking analysts with specific skills. What started as occasional translation work evolved into specialized training in counter-terrorism intelligence. Missions I could never discuss took me to locations I could never name. 3 years ago, I had been tapped for an elite joint task force that operated at the intersection of military intelligence and diplomatic security. My role required me to brief generals and ambassadors on sensitive matters of national security. The pressure was immense, the stakes impossibly high, but I thrived in that environment of precision and purpose. 6 months ago, I had led a complex operation that prevented a major security threat, one that would never make headlines, but had earned me a personal commendation from the Secretary of Defense. The subsequent promotion to colonel, at my relatively young age, had raised eyebrows, but no one who knew my work questioned whether it was deserved. Through all of this, I maintained the cover of a relatively unremarkable military career. For security reasons, much of my work remained classified even within military circles. My family, with their dismissive attitude toward my service, never asked enough questions to realize how little they knew. My mentor, Colonel Evelyn Gardner, had recognized my struggle with family expectations early on. She had taken me under her wing when I was still a lieutenant, guiding my career with wisdom born from her own experience as a woman building a path in a male-dominated field. "You don't need their validation," she told me, after I returned from a particularly brutal family Christmas 5 years ago. "You need to be clear about whose opinion actually matters in your life." Following her advice had cost me something. I withdrew from family interactions beyond the obligatory dinners. I missed weddings and birthdays when they conflicted with operations. I declined invitations to family vacations using work as an excuse. The distance had grown initially painful, but eventually liberating. The price extended to my personal life as well. Relationships faltered under the weight of my unpredictable schedule and the secrets I couldn't share. Friends drifted away when I disappeared for months with little explanation. My apartment, though comfortable, bore the Spartan evidence of someone who was rarely home enough to fully settle in. Yet I had built something else instead, a reputation for excellence, a network of colleagues who respected me, and the quiet satisfaction of meaningful work. I had found purpose in service that my family could never understand because they had never tried. As I lay there in my childhood bed, my phone buzzed with a text message. I reached for it, seeing General Lawrence's name on the screen. "Confirm 0900 meeting at Wilson Residence. Documents prepared for contract discussion." I texted back a simple affirmative, smiling at the thought of tomorrow morning. For years I had imagined a moment when my family would finally see me clearly. Now that it was imminent, I found myself wondering if it would change anything that mattered. Dawn broke with muted light, filtering through morning fog. I rose early, standing before my overnight bag with a decision to make. I had packed both civilian clothes and my formal uniform, complete with insignia and decorations. The choice felt symbolic: wear the uniform and make my position impossible to ignore, or dress in civilian clothes and let the revelation unfold more subtly. In the end, I chose a middle path: professional civilian attire with my military identification easily accessible. Let General Lawrence recognition do the work. When I descended to the kitchen, my mother was already orchestrating breakfast with military precision of her own, directing the housekeeper about proper coffee service and pastry arrangement. "There you are, Samantha. We are having breakfast on the terrace at 8:30 sharp. General Lawrence will arrive at 9. Please try not to say anything controversial. This contract is very important to your father." I poured myself coffee, hiding my expression behind the steam. "Good morning to you too, Mom." James and Allison arrived with their spouses, both couples dressed as though for a business meeting rather than family breakfast. My father emerged in his finest suit, checking his watch every few minutes and rehearsing points about Wilson Financial under his breath. By 8:45, we were arranged on the terrace like actors on a stage, my mother fussing over coffee cups and pastry plates, ensuring the tableau appeared perfectly casual, yet impressive. Now, when General Lawrence arrives, my father instructed us all, "Let me handle the introduction. James, have those projection figures ready, if he asks." "Allison mentioned the charity work with veterans your committee did last year. Samantha." He paused, considering what possible value I might add to the scenario. "Just be polite." I sipped my coffee, a calm settling over me. "Yes, Dad. I will be extremely polite to General Lawrence." The doorbell rang precisely at 9 o'clock. My father straightened his tie one last time, and my mother smoothed her already perfect hair. The housekeeper was dispatched to escort our important visitor to the terrace. I set down my coffee cup and stood positioning myself slightly apart from the family grouping. The moment was about to arrive, and despite everything, I felt a flutter of anticipation in my stomach. The French doors to the terrace swung open. General Robert Lawrence stood framed in the doorway, an imposing figure in his dress uniform, adorned with the decorations of a distinguished 30-year career. At 59, he maintained the ramrod straight posture and alert gaze that had intimidated generations of subordinates. My father stepped forward, hand extended, the practiced smile of a businessman ready to charm. "Thomas Wilson, General. Such an honor to welcome you to our home." General Lawrence didn't even glance at my father's outstretched hand. His eyes had already locked onto me, standing slightly removed from the family grouping. Without hesitation, he straightened and offered a crisp, formal salute. "Good morning, Colonel Wilson. I trust you received the briefing materials for our meeting." The terrace fell silent. My mother's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. James' fork clattered against his plate. Allison stared, mouth slightly open. My father's hand remained suspended in mid-air, the greeting unmet as confusion spread across his face. I returned the salute with practiced precision. "Good morning, General. Yes, I reviewed everything. I am prepared for the discussion." General Lawrence nodded, his expression professional, but with the slightest hint of amusement in his eyes. He had known exactly what he was walking into. "Excellent. And these must be your family members." My father, recovering first, attempted to regain control of the situation. "General Lawrence, I believe there is some confusion. My daughter is Captain Wilson. I am Thomas Wilson, CEO of Wilson Financial." The general turned to my father with a raised eyebrow. "No confusion at all, Mr. Wilson. Your daughter was promoted to colonel 6 months ago following her exceptional leadership during Operation Northern Shield. The details remain classified, but I can assure you her promotion was well earned." He turned back to me. "In fact, Colonel Wilson will be overseeing the evaluation committee for the military contract your company is pursuing. Her expertise in financial security protocols makes her uniquely qualified to assess potential contractors." My mother gasped, her social training momentarily forgotten. "Colonel Butt. Samantha never mentioned." My sister found her voice next, disbelief coloring her tone. "There must be some mistake. Samantha is just she has always been." James, ever the businessman, adapted quickest. His expression morphed from shock to calculated interest as he reassessed my potential value. "Well, this is certainly surprising news. Congratulations, Sam. You should have told us about this significant promotion." I kept my expression neutral, though inside a lifetime of emotions churned. "I would have told you if anyone had been interested in hearing about my career." My father appeared utterly lost, his worldview visibly crumbling as he looked between me and General Lawrence. "My daughter is overseeing the contract committee, but she didn't explain." The general nodded crisply. "Colonel Wilson's security clearance prevents her from discussing many aspects of her work, even with family. Now, perhaps we could begin our meeting. I have a tight schedule today." My mother suddenly sprung into hostess mode, a desperate attempt to regain her footing. "Of course, General. Please come inside to Thomas' study. Much more comfortable for a meeting." She turned to me with a smile so bright it seemed painful. "Samantha, darling, why don't you show the general the way? You know where your father's study is, of course." The artificial warmth in her voice almost made me laugh. After years of being the family disappointment, I was suddenly being treated as the honored daughter, a transformation that had nothing to do with my actual accomplishments and everything to do with how they might benefit from them. I nodded, professional to my core. "This way, General." As we moved toward the house, I caught glimpses of my family expressions. My father looked shell-shocked, his carefully constructed hierarchy shattered. My mother was already recalibrating, mentally revising family history to include pride in my military service. James was calculating angles and advantages, while Allison seemed caught between jealousy and confusion. In that moment, standing tall in my civilian clothes, but with the authority of my rank evident to all, I realized something important. The validation I had sought for so long felt hollow now that it had arrived. Their recognition came not from understanding my passion or respecting my choices, but from the external validation of a superior officer and the potential advantage my position might offer them. As General Lawrence and I walked into the house, leaving my stunned family on the terrace, I felt both vindication and a peculiar sadness. I had finally broken through their perception of me, but in doing so, I had also broken something within myself, the need for their approval at all. The meeting in my father's study lasted exactly 45 minutes. General Lawrence maintained absolute professionalism as we discussed the parameters of the military cybersecurity contract that Wilson Financial hoped to secure. I led the conversation, outlining the specific requirements and evaluation criteria, while my father sat uncharacteristically silent, still processing the revelation of my rank and authority. There will be 7 companies under consideration, I explained, reviewing the document before us. Each will be evaluated based on the same criteria, with no preferential treatment. My father cleared his throat. Samantha, Colonel, I mean, surely there is some advantage to having someone familiar with our company involved in the process. General Lawrence and I exchanged glances. I answered carefully, on the contrary, Dad, because of our family connection, I will need to be especially rigorous in my assessment of Wilson Financial proposal. Any appearance of favoritism would compromise the integrity of the process and my professional reputation. The General nodded in agreement. Colonel Wilson has already filed the appropriate disclosure forms regarding your family connection. The evaluation committee has implemented additional oversight, specifically to ensure absolute impartiality. My father's face fell slightly, the realization dawning that my position might not be the advantage he had quickly calculated it to be. When the meeting concluded, General Lawrence stood and offered me another crisp salute. I will see you at headquarters at 0800 tomorrow, Colonel. We have that briefing with the secretary. I returned the salute. Yes, sir. I will have the analysis completed by then. As he departed, escorted to the door by my visibly flustered mother, I remained in the study, bracing myself for the conversation I knew was coming. It didn't take long for the door to reopen, revealing not just my father but my entire family, all wearing expressions ranging from confusion to calculation. My mother spoke first, her voice honey-sweet. Samantha, darling, why didn't you tell us about this wonderful promotion? We would have celebrated, thrown you a party. I raised an eyebrow. The same way you celebrated when I made captain, or when I received my first commendation. Those announcements barely interrupted dinner conversation. James stepped forward, business smile firmly in place. Come on, Sam, that's not fair. We have always supported your career choices. We just didn't understand the significance. I crossed my arms. You never tried to understand. Not once in 12 years did anyone in this family ask me a meaningful question about my work or accomplishments. Allison, never one for subtlety, cut to her primary concern. So you are actually important now, important enough to influence Dad's contract. There it was, the naked self-interest that had always driven our family dynamics. I considered my next words carefully. I am one of 5 committee members evaluating all proposals, and as I explained to Dad, my connection to Wilson Financial means I will be especially careful not to show favoritism. My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. All these years, we thought you were just. He trailed off, unable to find a diplomatic way to express their collective dismissal of my career. Just what, Dad? I asked quietly. Just wasting my potential. Just playing soldier. Just avoiding real responsibility. Which version of not good enough were you applying to me? The room fell silent. My family exchanged uncomfortable glances, unused to direct confrontation from me. My father straightened his shoulders, attempting to reassert parental authority. Samantha, you have to understand. We always wanted what was best for you. The military just seemed so beneath what a Wilson could achieve. I laughed, the sound sharp and unexpected even to my own ears. Beneath a Wilson, I have briefed cabinet secretaries. I have led operations that saved lives. I have earned every promotion through merit and hard work, not family connections or social maneuvering. Tell me again how that beneath our family name. My mother reached for my hand, which I smoothly moved away. Darling, we didn't know. How could we? You never shared these details with us. Because you never asked Mom. She flinched at the calm certainty in my voice. 12 years of achievement, and not once did anyone at this table ask me a substantive question about my work or my goals. You were too busy comparing me to James' business success or Allison's social climbing to notice I was building something meaningful. James bristled. That not fair, Sam. We all have different paths. Yes, I agreed. We do. And mine has been consistently dismissed in this house. Last night at dinner, Dad told me I would never be anything significant. Do you remember that? The discomfort in the room was palpable now. My father had the grace to look embarrassed. I spoke out of turn. If I had known... What? I interrupted. If you had known I had rank and influence, you would have treated me with respect. That's the problem, Dad. Respect in this family has always been conditional, always tied to your narrow definition of success. I turned to face all of them. Let me be very clear about something. I will evaluate Wilson financial proposal with complete professionalism. I will neither advantage nor disadvantage the company because of our relationship. And going forward, my relationship with each of you will be determined by how you treat me as a person, not by what you think I can do for you. Allison sniffed dramatically. You have always had such a chip on your shoulder, Sam. We are just trying to be happy for you. I looked at my sister directly. No, Allison. You are trying to figure out how my position might benefit you. There a difference. I moved toward the door, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the confrontation. I will be checking out of the guest room and returning to my apartment. I have work to prepare for tomorrow meeting. My mother's eyes widened in alarm. But you always stay the full weekend. We have the charity brunch tomorrow, and I already told everyone you would be there. I paused at the doorway. That's the problem, Mom. You have always made plans for me without considering what I might want or need. That stops today. As I packed my overnight bag, I could hear the muffled sounds of my family arguing downstairs. The familiar patterns of blame and justification, the strategic realignments that always followed any disruption to the family hierarchy. For the first time, I felt completely removed from it. No anger, no hurt, just a clear-eyed understanding of the dynamics that had shaped us all. My father appeared in the doorway as I zipped my bag closed. Samantha, his voice faltered uncertain, in a way I had never heard before. I need to understand what happened. How did you achieve all this without us knowing? I straightened, looking at him directly. You didn't know because you didn't want to know, Dad. My success didn't happen in a way you could recognize or value, so you simply didn't see it. He stepped into the room, hands in his pockets, suddenly looking older than his 58 years. I always thought I was pushing you toward something better. I never considered that I found something better on my own, I finished for him. He nodded, a flicker of genuine regret crossing his face. I missed it, all of it. Yes, you did, I agreed without rancor. The question is, what happens now? My father, a man accustomed to controlling every situation, seemed genuinely at a loss. I don't know. I picked up my bag, unexpectedly compassionate toward his confusion. That makes two of us, Dad. But I do know I won't be back for the monthly dinners, not as they have been. If we are going to have a relationship going forward, it needs to be built on mutual respect, not your approval. As I walked down the stairs, my mother made one last emotional appeal, her voice breaking with manufactured tears. Samantha, please, family should always come first. I stopped on the bottom step, turning to look at her, my brother, my sister, and their spouses, all watching with varying degrees of calculation and confusion. That the thing, Mom. In a healthy family, everyone feels valued. Everyone matters. I have never had that here, so I built it elsewhere with people who see me clearly. I walked out the front door to my car, placing my bag in the trunk with deliberate movements. As I slid into the driver's seat, I caught a glimpse of my family watching from the doorway, their expressions a mix of disbelief, resentment, and the first faint stirrings of something that might eventually become understanding. Driving away from that house felt like crossing a boundary I had been approaching for years. Not a door slamming shut, but a window opening to a clearer, more honest future. Monday morning found me in my element, striding through the secured entrance of military headquarters, nodding to colleagues who greeted me with the respect I had earned through years of dedicated service. My office, though modest in size, reflected my priorities. Documents meticulously organized, commendations displayed without ostentation, and a single photograph of my team from our last deployment. Emma Carter, my closest friend and fellow officer, leaned against my doorframe, 2 coffee cups in hand. So, Colonel Famous, how did the family revelation go down? I accepted the offered coffee with a grateful smile. Remember that scene in movies where someone drops a bomb and everyone stands frozen in shock? Picture that, but with fancy china and country club manners. Emma laughed, closing the door behind her as she entered. Forks literally dropped, and coffee cups frozen midair, I confirmed, taking a sip. But the real fallout came after, when they realized my position wouldn't automatically translate to special treatment for the family business. Emma settled into the chair across from my desk, her expression growing serious. She had been there through some of my darkest moments, including a particularly difficult Christmas 5 years ago, when I had shown up at her apartment after a disastrous family holiday, emotionally shattered by my father's casual cruelty. "Are you okay?" she asked simply. I considered the question carefully. Surprisingly, yes. It feels like something shifted, not just in how they see me, but in how I see myself in relation to them. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Lieutenant Danielle Harris appeared with a stack of files. "Colonel, the briefing starts in 15 minutes, and General Lawrence asked if you could review these assessments beforehand." "Thank you, Lieutenant. I will be right there." As Emma departed with a supportive squeeze to my shoulder, I focused on the work before me, grateful for the clarity and purpose it provided. The morning unfolded in a series of meetings and briefings where my expertise was not only valued but essential. The contrast between my professional environment and family dynamic couldn't have been starker. The evaluation committee for the military cybersecurity contract met that afternoon, with 5 companies' proposals under consideration, including Wilson Financial. I had recused myself from direct evaluation of my father company, but remained present to provide technical expertise on the broader assessment criteria. 2 days later, my father made an unannounced appearance at headquarters, somehow securing a visitor pass through his business connections. I was called to the reception area, where I found him standing uncomfortably in his expensive suit, clearly out of place among the uniformed personnel. "Samantha Colonel Wilson," he corrected himself awkwardly. "I hope I am not interrupting anything important." I maintained my professional demeanor, acutely aware of the curious glances from staff members who had never heard me mention family. "Dad, this is unexpected. Do you have an appointment?" He shifted, uncharacteristically uncertain. "No, I just wanted to see where you work, to understand better." I hesitated, then nodded to the security officer. "He can come to my office for 15 minutes. Walking through the corridors, my father observed everything with new eyes. The security protocols, the efficient movement of personnel, the atmosphere of focused purpose. When we reached my office, he paused at the doorway, taking in the space that reflected my professional identity. "So this is where you do whatever it is you do," he said, his usual confidence nowhere in evidence. Some of it I confirmed, gesturing for him to take a seat. Much of my work happens in secured areas or in the field. He nodded, looking around at the commendations and certificates on my wall, actually reading them for perhaps the first time. You received the Intelligence Service Medal and the Joint Service Commendation. I didn't know what these meant before. There was something so unfamiliar in his voice, a hesitant acknowledgement of ignorance from a man who prided himself on knowing everything worth knowing. I didn't tell you, I said simply. He met my eyes directly. I didn't ask. The admission hung between us, small but significant. I have been thinking about what you said, he continued after a moment. About respect being conditional in our family. I wanted to see, I needed to understand what you have built here. The vulnerability in his voice was so unexpected that I found myself momentarily at a loss for words. Before I could formulate a response, my phone rang with a priority call I couldn't ignore. I need to take this, I said, reaching for the phone. He stood immediately. Of course, I should go. I didn't know Samantha. I never understood. As he turned to leave, I covered the phone receiver for a moment. Dad, maybe we could have dinner sometime. Just the two of us. Something like hope flickered across his face. I would like that. After he left, I returned to the demands of my position, but with a slightly altered perspective. The interaction had been brief, but represented something neither of us had experienced before, a moment of genuine seeing between father and daughter. The following weeks brought significant professional challenges. The contract evaluation process concluded with the committee selecting not Wilson Financial, but a smaller, more specialized firm with superior cybersecurity protocols. I braced myself for the family fallout, but when it came, it wasn't what I expected. My father called directly, his tone surprisingly measured. I understand the committee decision. Having reviewed the winning proposal, I can see where our submission fell short. I hadn't anticipated this response. You are not upset. A pause. Disappointed, yes. But the process was fair, and I have realized recently that there are different kinds of success, Samantha, different ways to build something meaningful. The conversation left me thoughtful. Perhaps the revelation of my position had triggered something beyond the initial shock, something like reflection. Not everyone in the family adjusted so gracefully. My mother continued her campaign to retroactively claim pride in my achievements, posting old photographs with newly invented captions about always supporting my military career. James maintained a careful distance, uncertain how to interact with me now that the hierarchy had shifted. Allison alternated between resentment and awkward attempts to leverage our connection in her social circles. But there was one unexpected bright spot. My younger cousin Diana, a 22-year-old college senior uncertain about her future, reached out to me directly. Sam, I know we haven't talked much, but I saw Aunt Patricia post about your military career, and I have been thinking about ROTC. Everyone in the family says I should go into finance or law, but it doesn't feel right. Could we talk sometime? That conversation led to regular mentoring sessions where I found myself providing the guidance and support I had never received. Diana's sharp questions and genuine interest in service reminded me of myself at her age, but with one crucial difference: she would not have to navigate the path alone. As fall turned to winter, I established clear boundaries with my family. I declined the traditional holiday gathering, instead hosting a small dinner at my apartment for Emma, Diana, and a few close colleagues. I set explicit expectations for communication. No more passive-aggressive comments, no more dismissive attitudes. Some family members adapted better than others. My father and I established a cautious new relationship based on mutual respect rather than authority and obedience. We met monthly for dinner, carefully avoiding the landmines of old patterns, gradually finding new ways to connect. My mother struggled the most, unable to understand why I wouldn't simply resume my place in the family system now that my status had been upgraded in her eyes. Each conversation required patient reinforcement of boundaries. Samantha, I don't understand why you won't come to the Hendersons' Christmas gala. I already told everyone my decorated military daughter would be there. Mom, I explained this. I have prior commitments. And more importantly, I need you to stop making promises about my time without consulting me first. But it would mean so much to me. And after all we have done for you, the old guilt tactics that once would have swayed me now bounced off newly strengthened resolve. What you have done for me, I asked quietly. What exactly do you think that is, Mom? Her silence was answer enough. Through it all, I found myself more grounded in my own worth, less susceptible to the family currents that had once tossed me about. The validation I had unconsciously sought for so long mattered less and less as I embraced the reality that I had already built a life of purpose and connection, completely independent of their recognition. In my professional realm, I continued to excel, leading my team through challenging operations with the confidence of someone who knew her own capabilities. When I received notification of consideration for yet another promotion, I shared the news not with my family but with the people who had actually supported my journey. My mentor Evelyn, my friend Emma, and the colleagues who had seen my potential from the beginning. The transformation wasn't about rejection or revenge. It was about reconstruction, building authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or approval seeking. Some family ties strengthened under the new terms, while others revealed themselves to be too fragile to survive honest interaction. By the time spring arrived, bringing with it the anniversary of that fateful family dinner, I had established a new normal one, where I defined success on my own terms, surrounded myself with people who valued me completely, and approached family relationships with clear-eyed awareness rather than desperate hope. The little girl who had once hungered for her father approval had become a woman who understood that true validation could never come from outside, and that the most important recognition was the quiet certainty of living aligned with her own values and purpose. 6 months after the morning that transformed my family dynamic forever, I stood at attention in a ceremony hall at the Pentagon, surrounded by distinguished military personnel and government officials. The Secretary of Defense presented me with a commendation for leadership during a classified operation, the details of which would never be made public, but had significantly impacted national security. As applause filled the room, I scanned the audience, my heart full at the sight of the people who had chosen to be there. Emma sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Beside her, Colonel Evelyn Gardner, my longtime mentor, nodded with quiet approval. My team members, the men and women who had served under my command, stood with perfect military posture, but unmistakable support in their eyes. And in the back row, somewhat uncomfortable in the military setting but undeniably present, sat my father. He had asked permission to attend 2 weeks earlier, a request that surprised me enough that I initially thought I had misheard. "This is important to you, so it is important to me," he had said simply. "If you are comfortable with me being there." The decision to include him had not been automatic. I had consulted Dr. Melissa Rivera, the therapist who had been helping me navigate the complex emotional terrain of family reconciliation. Her guidance had been characteristically thoughtful. Inviting him represents a choice, not an obligation, she had reminded me. What feels authentic to you in this moment? In the end, I had extended the invitation not just to my father, but to Diana as well, who sat beside him, absorbing every detail of the ceremony with bright interest. My mother, James, and Allison had not been included, a boundary that felt necessary and healthy. At the reception following the ceremony, my father approached with uncharacteristic humility. "I am proud of you, Samantha," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not because of the rank or the recognition, but because of the person you have become despite our failures." The acknowledgement, so different from the conditional praise of the past, touched something deep within me. "Thank you for coming, Dad. It means something that you are here." Diana bounced up beside him, eyes shining. Sam, that was incredible. Commander Foster was telling me about the leadership program you started for women in intelligence services. Is there any way I could intern there next summer? I smiled at her enthusiasm. We will talk about it. First, finish your degree. As they moved toward the refreshment table, Emma sidled up beside me. Family 2.0 seems less dysfunctional than the original version. I laughed. Baby steps. Dad is trying. Mom still thinks this is an elaborate phase I will grow out of. James keeps sending me investment opportunities for my military salary, which he still assumes is pittance. And Allison has decided that having a colonel sister is socially advantageous, so she suddenly wants weekly lunch dates. Emma raised an eyebrow. And how is that working out for her? About as well as you would expect, I replied, sipping my champagne. I have agreed to monthly coffee meetings contingent on her ability to get through an entire conversation without comparing our lives or making backhanded compliments. Later that evening, in the quiet of my apartment, recently upgraded to a comfortable 2-bedroom with a view of the Potomac, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The path had not been linear, with progress and setbacks woven together in the complex tapestry of family healing. My relationship with Andrew Bennett, a State Department analyst I had met during a joint task force, had developed slowly and thoughtfully. At 36, he brought his own family complexity to our relationship, allowing us to connect over shared experiences of creating healthy boundaries with people who struggled to respect them. Perhaps the most meaningful change had been my work establishing a mentorship program for young women entering military intelligence fields. The initiative, inspired by Colonel Gardner's guidance in my own career, had already connected 20 junior officers with experienced mentors who could help them navigate both professional challenges and the personal sacrifices such careers often demanded. Diana had become something of a project for me, though I was careful not to repeat my family pattern of imposing expectations. Instead, I listened to her hopes and confusion, offered perspective when asked, and supported her in finding her own path, even when it diverged from what I might have chosen. My father and I had established a new ritual: monthly dinners, where we slowly rebuilt a relationship based on who we actually were, rather than who we had expected each other to be. The conversations were sometimes awkward, occasionally painful, but increasingly authentic. Mom is still Mom, he had admitted during our last dinner. She can't understand why you won't simply come back to the fold now that she has decided your career is acceptable. I had smiled at the accuracy of his assessment. And you? Do you understand? He had considered the question carefully before answering. I am beginning to. You needed to be seen for yourself, not for how you fit into our family narrative. We failed at that for a very long time. Mother struggled the most with the new boundaries, alternating between tearful pleas about family obligation and social manipulation attempts. James maintained a cordial distance, our relationship polite but lacking depth. Allison oscillated between jealousy and calculated friendliness depending on her needs of the moment. Yet even these difficult relationships had evolved from their original state. The monthly family dinners, once a dreaded obligation, had been replaced by more limited, structured interactions where I could maintain my sense of self without drowning in old patterns. The most profound change, however, had been internal. The desperate need for validation that had driven me for so many years had gradually transformed into something healthier: self-acceptance that did not require external confirmation. I had learned to recognize my worth, independent of others' acknowledgement, to trust my own judgment about my choices and priorities. Dr. Rivera had helped me understand that forgiveness did not mean forgetting or returning to harmful patterns. It meant releasing the emotional burden of past hurts, enough to move forward unburdened, whether or not reconciliation was possible. Some days I still struggle with the little girl inside me who wants her family to be different, to be the source of unconditional love and support that children deserve, she had observed during one of our sessions. That longing may never completely disappear, and that, okay, The difference now is that you don't organize your life around trying to fulfill it." Her words resonated with the peace I had found, not a perfect resolution where every relationship was healed, but a genuine acceptance of reality and the freedom to build connections that nourished rather than depleted me. As spring blossomed into summer, I was assigned to lead a specialized training program for intelligence officers, a position that recognized both my technical expertise and leadership abilities. The work was demanding, but deeply satisfying, allowing me to shape the next generation of professionals in my field. One afternoon, while supervising a training exercise, I noticed a young lieutenant whose determined focus reminded me powerfully of myself 15 years earlier. Lieutenant Grace Martinez approached her assignment with the intensity of someone who felt she had something to prove, working twice as hard as her peers without seeking recognition. After the exercise concluded, I called her into my office. "Your analysis was exceptional, Lieutenant. You identified connections the others missed." She straightened, surprise flickering across her face before military discipline reasserted itself. "Thank you, Colonel. I appreciate the feedback." Something in her carefully neutral response prompted me to ask, "What drew you to intelligence work, Martinez?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. Her professional mask slipped momentarily, revealing something vulnerable beneath. "My family wanted me to take over the family restaurant business, ma'am. They didn't understand why I would choose this instead. I guess I am still trying to prove it was the right decision." The parallel was so striking that I found myself sharing something personal, breaking my usual professional reserve. "I understand that more than you might think, Lieutenant. My family spent years telling me I would never amount to anything in the military. Now I lead the division that evaluates their business contracts." Her eyes widened slightly, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "How did you handle it, Ma? The disconnect between your choices and their expectations?" I considered the question, wanting to offer something meaningful rather than platitudes. "I spent too many years seeking validation that was never going to come. The turning point was realizing that I was already succeeding by my own standards, whether they recognized it or not." As Lieutenant Martinez left my office, I recognized that the cycle had completed itself. I had become the mentor I once needed, offering to another young woman the guidance and recognition that had been so painfully absent in my own early career. That evening, as I prepared for a dinner with Andrew, I caught my reflection in the mirror. At 32, I saw in my own eyes a clarity and peace that had been missing for most of my adult life. The journey had not been what I expected, but it had led me exactly where I needed to be, to a life defined not by others' expectations, but by my own values, filled with relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or performance. The validation I had sought from my family for so long had ultimately come from an unexpected source myself, and that had made all the difference. Have you ever found yourself fighting for recognition from people who should have supported you from the beginning? Have you had to create boundaries with family to protect your mental health and happiness? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by family approval. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we are born into.